the live stream, and I did not start the recording, so I should start the... Hello, Anya. I see you coming in.
Hey, Matt. Just got home and doing a couple of things before I can jump into the event.
No worries. We got 10 more minutes.
Happy to be here.
Have you? You should look behind you. We've got an interesting transportation for May the 4th on the wall back there.
Someone sent me a meme today that was "May the 4th be with you," and then it was a priest and also with you.
Yeah, I've had that one a few times. I'm reading a friend of mine just posted. It's like, okay, let's talk about Han Solo. Han Solo shows up on Vader's Death Star hours after Alderaan's destroyed. On the ship, he carries Vader's son, Vader's daughter, Vader's astrobot, the protocol droid that Vader built as a kid, the Wookiee who saved Ahsoka's life, and the literally Obi-Wan Kenobi back.
As you do.
That?
As you do, yeah. Bring all that.
You gotta be sitting there thinking, like, Vader's gotta be saying, oh, like, who's this dude? Like, everybody else was, whatever, from the past, but who's this guy? Who's this dude wearing a vest? Oh,
yeah, who's this guy who just showed up out of nowhere?
Well, and then, the fact that whatever it was, like a day later, Vader's in essentially a jet fighter and he gets shot in the butt by Han, same dude, who's effectively flying a modified 18-wheeler. All right. We're not going to get started until another 8 minutes, but probably this time. A lot of people coming into World, which that's the thing that I always, where I see people fellow World.
And Julie King is directing people over here.
Yeah, I know on the one computer I had to do a big update to get it in, so. Got another 7 minutes. Casual opening one. No. Sergey, what's going on? What time is it by you? It's like 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning?
Just exploring the place.
Oh, good.
Actually, I just noted that all good Doom style controls work, like WASD and so on. So no need to press on arrow keys.
No. Yeah, it's got the WASD controls. Good first-person shooter.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, I know you're somewhere else besides in the States. Where are you located?
Actually, I'm in Europe. I'm in Tallinn, in Estonia.
Estonia. Excellent.
Yeah.
About 8 hours? So 2 a.m.-ish?
Yep, 2 a.m. for him. So do you know what Roblox is?
Yes, I know. My kid accuses me that she says, like, Mom, you're not working, you're playing Roblox.
Is that what this looks like?
It is very similar. Have you ever played Roblox?
I haven't. Is it immersive?
No, it's 2D.
No, it's 2D, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Guys, you've got echo coming from somebody's microphone.
I think it's Katya's. I watch it. The nice thing about this system too is I can see where the voices echo from, so I think it's mic open when she talks. But yeah, no, actually, I've had a lovely little email conversation going on with the Roblox team because my daughter locked herself out of her account, and the only email address that they have, they don't collect personal information from kids, so the only email address they have is mine. But the same email address is actually tied to my Roblox account, which is effectively the parent account for her account. So if I go to reset the password, it lets me reset the password on mine, but I'm like, well, how do I reset the password on hers? Like, oh, you just enter the email address. I'm like, the only email address that's tied to it is mine. How do we do this? So there's been a very fun back and forth with their team trying to figure out how to reset the password.
Well, actually, we had the same problem with my kid, but I just dropped.
You just gave it up and created a new account?
To be honest, I don't know. So we tried several times resetting his account, but we never succeeded. So either he has chosen something else to play with, or maybe he created a new account.
Yeah, my daughter, after about a month or two, my daughter kind of gave up and created a new account, but I'm still sort of hopeful because they are responding. So I'll give their support team some credit. They're slow to respond, but they're definitely responding. And we're still kind of hopeful that I'll actually be able to reset her account.
It's nice that they're at least responding.
Good that they're responding. I also consider it kind of sad that the benchmark for customer success is that they're responding.
This is
opposed to solving the problem or actually getting the customer back to playing the game. But whatever. That is what it is. Couple more minutes. What are you doing? How was your I got to hear some of the results, but how was your first voiceover recording?
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. I missed you for a second. Were you talking to me?
I was. I said, how was your first voiceover recording session experience?
It went pretty well. It definitely went maybe a little longer than I thought. I thought I was maybe going to be there for an hour and a half, but yeah, just trying to get through those the 13-minute script without making any mistakes. It was definitely pretty tricky, but I got 2 pretty good takes. The experience itself wasn't too bad though. Like I actually enjoyed it.
Curious. I'm waiting to see the final result of it, or I should say, hear the final result of it.
Yeah, I honestly kind of hate my voice on audio, so I hope it sounds good, but we will see.
Yeah. Yeah, I got about a minute. I got some people jumping in on the Facebook live stream. So for those of you who are watching on the Facebook live stream, would love it if you just introduce yourself and say hello. And we will get started here shortly. On time, and you know what? Maybe we'll actually run the session a little bit short today. We'll see, but maybe not, because we were kind of having a pretty solid discussion before it started, which I will reference in a few moments. We got about 1 minute. My presenters are already up here on stage, which is great, and daughter has just delivered food for me, which is awesome.
Ooh.
No. Okay, so far. But like I said, we got about a minute till we get started, and then people are already taking seats, which is great.
Is Mark back?
Mark is back, I think. He said hello about a second.
Oh, okay.
I am back.
Awesome.
Mark does the surprising thing of actually listening and that, and then we hear echo. Away, but she'll be back here shortly. All right, so it is 6:15, and we have a couple of people watching on the Facebook live stream. So we're just going to get started. And I will start with, once again, hello and welcome back, since it seems the majority of our audience that's here with us this time has been here before. There's at least one or two that haven't, or two that haven't. But for those of you who haven't been here before, this is VR Air Chicago, an ongoing event series that we have been running for 5 years, over 5 years now. We've been running it monthly for 5 years. We did several years live and in person. The pandemic forced us to go virtual, and we are very hopeful that in the very near future, we will be back to doing live events in person. But from this point forward, we will be actually doing them hybrid. So there will always be an online component from this point forward. But with that said, we do, before we get started and start talking about the actual topic of the evening, we do want to thank our sponsors who make this possible. Sponsors are one, Bundle AR and Verbella. Anthony, are you doing the introduction for Bundle AR today?
Yes.
Nope, I'm letting you intro Bundle AR, and I will get out of your way.
All right. All right. Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well tonight. My name is Anthony Colon, and I am the marketing coordinator at Bundle AR. Just to give you all a very quick background of who we are and what we do, Bundle AR is an augmented reality company based out of Chicago, and we've created a web-based AR platform that enables our users to design, publish, and access augmented reality experiences without having to write a single line of code. AR is changing everything, and our goal is to try to make this technology as accessible as we can. And our team has really been working hard at optimizing the platform, so people like me who really don't have any coding experience whatsoever can now design and publish their own custom AR. So it's pretty amazing. We do have a quick video here too, just so you can all get a little more background on what we do, if you'd like to play that, Matt.
Until now, creating augmented reality was hard. IT departments simply do not have the expertise, so they rely on expensive developers and one-off solutions. Introducing Bundle AR's augmented reality platform. Bundle AR's revolutionary, self-serve augmented reality content management system allows anyone, anywhere, to easily create, edit, and deploy augmented reality to Apple and Google devices instantly and on a global scale. Now is the time to add on-demand, accurate, and trusted digital information to your communications through a tool nearly everybody already has, their smartphone. Perfect for just-in-time immersive training, learning, and development programs. Easily place multimedia content like videos or interactive 3D models on real-world items like signage, brochures, or packaging to enhance your audience's understanding of your product, procedures, or story. No special equipment or coding skills necessary. It's augmented reality made easy. Visit bundlear.com now to get started.
Thank you, Matt. So as you can see, the applications for AR are only truly limited by your imagination. And if any of you guys would like to know more, I'll be sticking around the event for a little bit. So thank you, everyone.
And that is Bundle AR. Our other sponsor for this evening, who is not going to have a representative in the room that I know of, is 1871. 1871 is Chicago's technology incubator. Actually, 1871, kind of big news with 1871. They just celebrated their 10th anniversary, and they provided some stats as part of their as their 10th anniversary, which is taking place officially. Their 10th anniversary, I believe, is actually today or yesterday, and I will get some of them in. I'll have some of them looked up before the end of the event. But 1871 is Chicago's technology incubator. They have several hundred companies that are based out of 1871. They now have a virtual campus that is essentially their own Verbella campus, a private Verbella campus, so that they can support companies and entrepreneurial technology companies all over the world. And they do have members that are all over the world. They have some in Europe, Africa, I believe South America, Asia at this point, and all over the US. I know that they always joke that Texas is kind of. But 1871 is a great community, great technology incubator for anyone, whether you're in the idea phase, the startup phase, the growth phase. It's a great community to get connected with, and who is looking to get connected with Chicago's technology community. Our last and final sponsor for the evening. Verbella is joining. No, they are not. Cam is not going to be here this evening. So Verbella happens to be the space that we are in right now. Verbella came to us early on in the pandemic, and when we first went virtual, we actually went into Altspace, which is a different environment, and Verbella saw what we were doing and invited us to come try out their technology, and we have loved it and been partnered with them ever since. VR Air Chicago actually maintains an office in this Verbella campus. We helped them create the 1871 VX community on top of the Verbella platform, and they have been a great supporter of VR Air Chicago ever since. Forward to continuing that collaboration. That is Verbella. It's the space you're in. If you do have any questions about the capabilities of this actual platform, feel free to ask us. We're happy to talk to you about it. We've been using it for over 2 years at this point. There are things like virtual office suites, the ability to host massive virtual events in their auditorium space, as well as just some of the other stuff around the campus, like their soccer fields and their stages and other things. With that, though, we also have a number of partners that help us promote the event, get it out to the audience. Get it out to audiences, help us source speakers, help us find people to connect with and follow. And those would be XR Women, Developers Association of Chicago, 21Tel, which is Chicago's creative technology, creative company incubator, and VRML, VR Motion Learning. But with that, we are here tonight to talk about transportation technology and the transportation in reality. And we do have a bit of a smaller panel this evening, so we're going to change the format a little bit. We're going to keep the normal format that we have, but we do expect that tonight's going to be a little bit more just of an open conversation, as opposed to the formal Q&A. So we would still like people in the audience to raise your hand if you want to ask a question when we get to the Q&A portion. But the nice thing about having a smaller panel is we can more fun with the conversation topics. And it is a pretty cool topic. It's a rather interesting one. It's one, we knew this one was going to be a little bit challenging, and that's part of why we chose it, because we do want to bring all the industries that are utilizing augmented and virtual reality technology. But with that, for those of you who have never been to one of these events before, the way this is going to work is that we have two presenters. They are going to come up and they're going to talk for about 10 minutes each, just giving you a background of who they are, what they do, the organizations they represent. That will help frame sort of where they're from in terms of the conversation going forward and their areas of expertise. I will be presenting a little bit more this evening as well. Normally I try to stay on the sidelines and not talk too much, but I do have some background information and some experience working, supporting transportation companies with augmented reality technology and, in one case, virtual reality technology, so I can speak to the topic a little bit from the technology perspective. But we will get to a Q&A portion after they do their presentations, and at that point, it's going to be an open conversation. Again, for those of you who haven't seen this event, we are recording. We are basically streaming this live right now to Facebook Live. We have viewers on Facebook Live. Hello, Francis. Nice. Once again, I see that you have commented. And anyone else who joins the Facebook Live feed in the near future, we would love it if you guys would introduce yourselves so that we know you're there. We do interact live with our Facebook Live audience as well, so they can send us questions in the comment section and we will read them in the room. But the purpose of this event is for you, it's for our audience. It is for us to help you take whatever your next step forward is with using immersive technology. So anything that you want to do, connect with somebody who's on the stage, connect with somebody in the community, get your question answered here, set up a time later to actually try some technology, feel free to reach out to our team. We're very accessible. You can find us on LinkedIn. All the presenters generally have their contact information at the web pages on vrarchicago.com. Because, again, the point here is to help everybody move forward with using this technology. But with that, I would like to introduce our first presenter for the evening, who is going to be Mark Black. Apologize, Mark, if I'm mispronouncing your name. I should have gotten that before the event started. But if you would like to come up and join me right here, I will check your information for the Facebook live stream, and I will let you go through your background and introducing yourself.
Thanks. Matt, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, good. Just checking. I wouldn't want to talk for 5 or 10 minutes and then have somebody say, well, we couldn't hear you. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here, Matt, and everyone in the audience. You might be asking, why is there a communications guy here in the technology panel? But I've been in the automotive industry for a long time. I've done a lot of different things, and I'll go through some of that stuff. And I've seen a lot of augmented reality, virtual reality, and I've seen automakers use that in various ways. I can go back 20 some years when I went into a Ford design studio where they were using a rudimentary 3D printer, which cut sheets of paper to create instant parts. And instant is a joke because they would turn the printer on and they'd come back about 2 days later and they'd have a part. And it weighed about 50 pounds, even though it was about, the size of 2 phone books, because it was basically laminated paper glued together. But so I've seen a lot of it. And I'll start back talking about myself. Obviously, I'm no expert in technology, but I have a solid understanding of what technologies are utilized in the automotive space. And when I say automotive space, I mean everything. And that's part of the background that I'll go into. I've seen manufacturing, marketing, selling, buying, and of course, driving and reviewing vehicles. I've been an automotive journalist for 30 years. I've been in probably 200 different cars during that time. So 200 cars times 30 years, you can do the math. That's a lot of cars I've driven. I have a very solid understanding of the soup to nuts production of vehicles in the automotive world. And for the past decade, I've worked at the Chicago Automobile Trade Association, which is the new car dealer association for Metro Chicago. We have about 400 members, one of the largest dealered metro areas in the country. And that has given me a very good, deep understanding of how dealers operate and how manufacturers and dealers operate together to help market and sell vehicles. I'm a professionally trained driver. I've been to a bunch of advanced driving schools, and I'm a passable shade tree mechanic, although today's cars are not so easy to work on. I would much prefer to work on something from the 60s or 70s. I've been on numerous plant tours. I've been behind the scenes, behind the design room, the design and development rooms at various manufacturers. I've participated in early marketing studies. I beta tested some of the technologies that we're utilizing today. And so I got my start in tech, ironically, a lot like many others, maybe, of my generation. I'll say, right now I'm in my mid-50s, just by being in the right place at the right time. I started when computers weren't on everyone's desk, when cell phones didn't exist. And I transitioned an automotive publishing house from print to digital during the infancy of the internet. Learning along the way, we quickly became a leader in the automotive online space and set standards for the automotive shopping websites that are still used today. A financial model that's built not only on advertising revenue, but also sales referral and kind of sponsorship positioning. Joined the Chicago Auto Trade Association in 2007, and I was tasked with digitizing the auto show experience, creating a class-leading website that not only provided a virtual auto show experience, but also connected attendees with dealers down the street. We're very unique here in Chicago in that we have a website that I'm general manager of called Drive Chicago. It's a new and used car shopping portal, the largest in Chicago. And basically, by connecting auto show attendees with dealers down the street, utilizing Drive Chicago, we can show a direct correlation between the auto show and vehicle sales. As technology progressed, obviously the auto show got more and more advanced in how we measured and engaged with our attendees. We've done just about everything at the auto show. We've done AR, we've done VR, we've used passive Bluetooth monitoring, we've done attendee recognition with path mapping, and we've done virtual information sharing so that attendees can literally share their personal information with our exhibitors, and exhibitors can share back almost like a virtual handshake. So, with more than 30 years experience under my belt in the automotive space, I've seen a lot happen. If you think back to just year 2000, okay, the BMW 7 Series was the technological flagship for automotive, but it wowed buyers with 2 front airbags, anti-lock brakes, and a rudimentary stability control system and a CD player. That was the limit of technology back then. And so we've come a long way over that time. And virtually every vehicle right now has forward collision warning, blind spot monitor, lane keeping assist, backup cameras, rear cross traffic alert, driver alertness monitors to tell us that we left someone in the back seat. And most vehicles have a form of semi-autonomous driving, which is basically level 1, level 2 cruise control, which allows drivers to kind of take their hands off the wheel and let the car drive itself on an interstate. And let's not forget heads-up displays. I mean, that's a form of augmented reality for sure, and advanced always connected infotainment systems, which are becoming more and more a player in the automotive space. We've seen huge advancements from manufacturers and how they sell cars. Some cars today are completely sold digitally. Tesla tries to sell cars without you ever stepping foot in a showroom until you pick that car up. Most sales today are done still in the traditional way in a showroom, but that's not to say that technology has left that process behind. Manufacturers like Cadillac, during the beginning of COVID, created a virtual showroom where you could literally make an appointment, go online, do just what we're doing here, walk into a virtual dealership, find the car you want, sit in it with a salesperson in the seat next to you to answer your questions, and you could immediately change the features and the colors of that vehicle. So let's say you wanted a sunroof. Bam, you could flip a switch and now that car had a sunroof. Let's say you wanted the gray interior instead of the white interior. Bam, you flip a switch and you get yourself the interior that you're looking for. And we've seen dealers use augmented reality as well. Porsche is into that heavily because so many of their cars are bespoke, meaning they're built custom from the factory. So literally you can go into a Porsche dealer, go into a room and be immersed in the car that you're actually designing and ordering from the factory in Stuttgart. It's very, very cool technology. And it's really sped up the sales process and also put customers more at ease with their purchase, especially on a vehicle where you're spending $150,000. On the manufacturing side, we've seen digital modeling greatly advance crash protection, helping cars be both lighter and safer. We've seen how it changes the way vehicles are designed and assembled. So auto manufacturers use virtual reality, augmented reality to design and build vehicles before they're actually even doing it. And I actually witnessed this at General Motors one time at their proving grounds, where they demonstrated how a part that an engineer had designed could not be assembled because they couldn't get it into the car. It was the wrong shape for the space that they had to put it in. And they virtually modeled it until they got it right, where it would actually fit with clearance of less than 5 millimeters on each side to get it through the door opening. It was very, very cool and very, very neat way to see how they used virtual modeling to be able to change a part. It didn't cost them a penny of production, but it would have cost them millions had they gone ahead and done this and built that part and had a supplier built 10,000 of those parts and ship them to the factory, and they couldn't get them into the car. Very, very cool demonstration of how they're using that. In the public sector, automakers have been using simulators to try and help people understand what it's like to drive impaired or distracted. I want to say 2004, 2005, I sat in a room and it was almost like you see those airplane simulators that pilots fly in. It was literally that big of a room, that big of a simulator with projection screens all around me. And when I say projection, actual projectors projecting on the screen with basically Roblox like graphics. And they were able to change how the vehicle operated based on my inputs on a level of, as I got more virtually drunk, so to speak, or I got virtually distracted. They would do things like, all right, we want you to change the radio station now. And they would show how just changing the radio station was enough to cause me to get into an accident. Very, very cool. Way back, Ford was doing that. Obviously, now you can do that with goggles, and they do that at the auto show. General Motors has a display here at our auto show every year where you put on virtual goggles and you sit in a seat that shakes and moves around, and you actually can get inside a Baja Chevy ZR2 pickup truck. Very, very cool. But by far the biggest envelope for expansion right now that automakers are looking at is in the infotainment and subscription space. If you think about early Navi systems, how clunky they were to program, how often they took us on paths that were far from the optimal route through neighborhoods that we probably didn't want to go through, and how their limited maps, it didn't even get you across the country. You'd have to literally swap out CDs in the trunk while you were driving on trips. Today, your phone is that virtual assistant, and it's your driving buddy too, seamlessly connecting to your vehicle's infotainment display wirelessly. They can provide you with instant access to the world through Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant. You can make hotel reservations. You can get parking, find your parking spot. You can order food and pick it up at grocery stores. But more so, what this technology has enabled under the skin, automakers are already updating vehicle software over the air. It's rolling out. Stellantis, which is formerly FCA, is one of the leaders in that space. Tesla also does it with over-the-air updates to their vehicles, allowing you to upgrade and fix software glitches remotely, saving you a trip to the dealer. They can also do subscription-based things. So if you think about OnStar or XM Sirius Radio, those were early subscriptions, dipping their toe into what can we sell consumers who buy cars. But now manufacturers have the ability to extend the range of a battery pack, for example, or providing additional safety or autonomous features. And even things like they can turn on and turn off performance in a vehicle remotely. Stellantis has different keys that can be used to make their SRT vehicles perform differently. And they can even do over-the-air things to vehicles to slow them down. Very, very cool features. But most of all, they can do this instantly. And sadly, they can take them away. So think about that. Next time you go and pay $10,000 for autonomous driving in a Tesla, when you go to sell that vehicle, that subscription doesn't transfer. So it's $10,000 down the drain. But I can't end this discussion without a quick talk on the looming transportation disruptor on the horizon, which is autonomous driving. It won't be long before consumer vehicles can drive themselves. Right now, there's trucks traversing between New Mexico and Florida with an engineer at the wheel. And by that, think about a trained engineer. The trained engineer basically just monitors systems. That's all they're doing. They're not steering. They're not speeding it up. They're not slowing it down. And it's going all the way from New Mexico to Florida. The reason that it can work down there is generally it's a very flat route. And it's also a very good weather route, not a lot of snow on the road down there. So that's happening. Also, there's limited examples of taxis and delivery vehicles buzzing around city streets here in the United States without a driver at the wheel. All of these, though, are very, very small and limited experimental applications. To provide true consumer autonomous driving, we're still a ways away. There's a sea change that needs to happen in all of the technologies to support that, from the car to the road to the vehicle communications. It all has to play together nicely. And so I think I've said enough here. It's clear that technology's changed the way that cars are designed, built, sold, and driven. Technology has been a huge driver behind that. Massive changes have happened since the year 2000, almost to the point where the first 80 years or so of traditional consumer transportation you could think of as, all right, that's one block. And now in this last 20 years, we've just seen so much growth. And all of that is because of the advanced technologies that automakers are now putting into place.
Mark. That was a whirlwind.
I was trying to get it all in for you.
That's a ton, and there's plenty to talk about that we'll have plenty to talk about in the conversation. Yeah. I'm gonna throw one question at you really quickly, just so before we get to the next speaker, because you brought it up with the autonomous driving. I mean, I'm just plain and simply, and again, you said this. It's like 30. This is one of those things that always it hits me when we start to think about time frame and like, okay, how long ago certain things were. Because you're saying you like to work on cars from the 60s and 70s, but then you say, yeah, you've been in the auto industry for 30 years. It's weird to think about the fact that 30 years ago was 1990. It was not, we're not talking 60s and 70s. We're talking the 90s. And so a lot of this technology, yeah, it's obviously advancing very quickly. But from the autonomous driving perspective, like, do you see that being more commercial use, where there's going to be a lot of commercial driving? So things like Uber, I guess from the consumer standpoint, things like Ubers and Lyfts, versus obviously that you said already that there's trucks that are doing it now, there's delivery vehicles that are doing it now. There seems to be some commercial uses of it that are taking advantage of it right now, versus you or me just having a car that drives itself.
Yeah, so you're very right there. So when you say commercial, I want to split that up too. So think heavy over-the-road trucks that operate from a intermodal in Joliet to an intermodal in Atlanta, which aren't inside the city, they're outside, they're off of an interstate. That will be the first one to get autonomous. By far, they're way ahead of the game there. It's much, much easier to drive a truck on an interstate than it is to drive a taxi in New York City. And the amount of technological advancements that have to happen before an actual robot taxi can pick you up and drop you off safely is huge. I was talking actually to a Ford engineer about this just the other day. Basically, every single car is going to have to talk to every single car on a one-to-one level. So they're not going to go through a third-party server, so to speak. So it wouldn't be like your car's talking to the Google Cloud and then the other car's talking to the Google Cloud. It'll be your car's talking to the other car, because there's not enough time to allow that transaction to happen. And then roads themselves, they'll have to figure out ways to embed roads with proper sensors and markings so that vehicles can operate autonomously on those roads. And that's not even counting the programming and the technology that needs to get put into the vehicles. So those are the kind of hurdles that they're trying to figure out right now. I mean, Tesla's got full self-driving beta out there. That's basically Google Maps on steroids. It's not really talking to anything else, and it's just looking at the environment around it, and that will work fairly well. But it's got to work 100% or very, very close to it. It's got to be safer than you and I driving the vehicle, and it's not right now. And that's the holdback. Tesla will never get there with the technology that they have in their cars. They'll get close, but they'll never get there. They need to do more. And that's what something like Super Cruise or Blue Cruise, I think is the one at Ford. Super Cruise is at General Motors. They actually have the roads mapped to centimeters. They update them continuously. So if construction is done on the Kennedy, for example, nightly, that actually appears in the database that the car uses to drive itself. Whereas Tesla has to recognize that construction and then understand what it is and then avoid it. Super Cruise and Blue Cruise actually will have that baked into the system. So that's a little bit of a difference. But yeah, you're right. Commercial is where it will hit first.
answer there just gave me 4 more questions, but we'll get to those in the Q&A. I want to make sure Sergey gets a chance to get up here and do his introduction. So thank you, Mark. You'll join me back up here in a few for Q&A. Sergey, do you want to join me?
Yeah. Hello, Matt.
Hello. I'm going to make sure, let me take a look at the camera shot and make sure that you're in a good position. You are. I will go away and be quiet now. And so.
Okay, so you're leaving me. Okay, you're leaving me alone in front of the audience. Okay, so hello everyone. Can I ask for the first slide of my presentation, please? Yeah, okay, that's the second one, but no problem. So many thanks to everybody who made this meeting happen. It's actually quite a new and exciting format for me. So I'm Sergey, I run a software company, and I will be sharing a couple of VR cases from what we did in the past. But first let me just tell you who we are. So what you see on the slide is the map of our operations. The name of the company is HQ Software. We are headquartered in Tallinn, in Estonia. Well, that's, as I said earlier, somewhere in Europe, in the Baltic region. It's a nice big country that takes about 2 hours of driving from one border to another. But another advantage is that it has zero corporate income tax. So please consider visiting it. We also operate a development center in Tbilisi in Georgia. Again, it's the original Georgia in Europe, but now it's the south of it. And we also have people in Poland, so about 120 developers in total. And our customers are all over the world, and some of them are in Australia and in the US at the same time, meaning that this is the same company. So we have to coordinate our meetings between 3 totally different time zones. So making a speech at 2 a.m., which is actually almost 3 a.m. now for me, is something usual for the business. Okay, can you switch to the next slide, please? Okay, so a few live faces from the company. So we see live people behind the avatars, but please go to the next one, to the use cases. Okay, so our involvement in automotive was 80% about something that was not and is not VR and AR. It's test labs management, stuff closer to IoT, to business process automation, like testing process automation, collecting data that comes from test devices, managing these devices, visualizing what is generally going on in the facility, and so on and so forth. But by the way, we also touch with our hand that Porsche ER experiences that Mark mentioned. I think this were that ones. For sure, those are business critical tasks and they made good money for us. But I want to share something that was that made much less money in it, but I would say it was quite unique. It was about getting people drunk without any booze. Yeah. So the concept was one of respected car makers, aiming to raise their safety record, focused on the most unsafe part of the car, on the driver. You know, we all wait for the autopilot, but we still need to cope with the legacy style of driving cars and making this way of driving cars safer. In particular, they focused on drivers who are below 21, on the younger part of the audience. And this is for sure the craziest part, just as I was. And one of the goals was to educate them on what will happen if they get, just a bit. Everyone has its own little bit, but the problem with these little bits of alcohol, is that small levels of intoxication, as well as actually fatigue, are not that much felt in usual life environments. So you are under an illusion that you're okay and you can cope with the situation. And in most cases, you usually do, until you suddenly get into something tense, into some critical situation that requires fast reaction, fast thinking, motoric functions, and so on and so forth. So basically, creating a critical situation for a driver in a controlled environment is an easy task. So just ask somebody, make some driving exercise under time pressure, and that's it. But the problem was that it's not legal. It was not legal, and it still is not legal to give alcohol to the ones below 21. So we gave them VR. That application was made quite a few years ago. So at that time, we only had Samsung Gear VR. That was quite new to the time. And we used its camera pass-through capability to add a little delay to the image that the victim saw, add some blurring or doubling in the eyes, and so on and so forth, or all together. And this way, we created what is called cinematographic illusion. This effect is familiar for pilots, for example. You can Google for it. It's actually a very serious thing when you lose your spatial orientation, when you're in a cloud, or when you don't have any visual reference. And for our case, we were transmitting to the victim's eyes a visual reference that didn't match what his inner ear felt. Next slide, please. Okay, so that created a variety of effects, and I tried it on myself. Believe me, vodka couldn't do better. Therefore, it was a successful simulation, and you needed actually like 15 minutes after it to recover. Well, we were not present at the events when this was used on real people, I mean for training, but verbal feedback from the field was just great. To be honest, I'm not sure. I cannot share any figures how they measure the effect in decreasing the number of drunk accidents. But their trainers said that we're happy with what they heard from their, let's say, patients, and the expected change of behavior they saw from them. And for us, and hopefully for you, this could be an interesting and unusual example of how the effects of VR and AR that are usually unwanted ones can be used as a key feature of an application. Because all these vestibular issues, they are quite familiar to everyone who starts using VR, and they are even on the manual of the Oculus. And here we use them as a key feature of the app. The text stack is on the slide as well, so if you're interested. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, yeah. This one could be less funny, however, also was also quite useful. Everyone has mentioned Roblox for a few times in this meeting already. So we visualized in a very simple, let's say in a Roblox way, almost schematically, what happens in a couple of typical situations on the road. That was done for the same company. For example, what happens when you enter a roundabout, when the cars are constantly coming and from the left of you, and you need to get into the traffic, or what happens when you brake intensively in the front of a heavy truck. Surprisingly, many drivers just don't know that you should not do that. And we gave them an opportunity to sit in the driver's seat of this truck and try not hitting a sedan in front of them when the driver of this sedan pulls heavy on brakes. So no need to say that it always ended somewhere in the driver's seat of the sedan. So it was quite visual and quite good demonstration of what you should not do in front of something heavy. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and the third one was a simulation of what happens when you drive off-road on a slippery dirt. That was for someone who has never left asphalt, like don't steer too rough. So basically, what we learned there was that high-quality pictures are not really needed for training. Schematic graphics, very similar to the computer games of the 90s, work really well. You don't need all these fancy toys. You just need to show basic things, and people are able to learn from it. Again, tech tools are on the slide if you're interested. But could you please switch to the next one? Well, basically that's it. For what we do now in VR and in transportation as well is workforce practical skills training, like typical maintenance tasks, teaching engineers or teaching mechanics how to take off a gearbox or repair something else. Well, this also worked really well, saves a lot of money, creates wow factor, retention, and so on and so forth. But those figures are Googleable. And no need to take your time with quoting something that is well known and easy to find. But what I also want to share is that from my personal experience, from what I myself learned during all my years in the software business and in this VR business in particular, is almost everything may be doable online, but being able to actually see each other and have a glass of real beer may be worth months of virtual tasks and virtual learning or virtual talks. So yeah, thanks you once again for listening. Thank you for spending this 5 minutes with me. And I open for questions if any, but just please mind that I'm not too technical. I know how to let's say make developers work or how to bring some ideas to their table, but if you get too technical, I will not be able to answer. I will have to take it offline.
All right.
Okay,
Sergey. Normally at this point we would go straight to Q&A, but I'm actually going to present a little bit on the technical side of things, just because again, we have a little bit of a smaller panel today, and I've done some work fighting for this industry. So you can go ahead and take your seat. I'm going to talk really quickly, and I'm going to invite both of you back up here in just a moment to join me for the Q&A. But you had brought up an interesting question, or you brought up an interesting point that I wanted to talk about, which is the fact these are some of the hangups that you see when you're delivering augmented reality and virtual reality technology solutions to enterprises. And what came up, which is one of the interesting ones that you brought up, which is one of those topics that comes up a lot, is the concept of the fidelity. If we're going to be presenting people with training, they want the fidelity of this graphic of an engine that you're going to teach somebody how to maintain. It needs to perfectly match an actual engine. And what those of us in the technology space who've done this a long time have kind of figured out and learned is really don't need that much fidelity. Like it doesn't, very, very low level graphics and very, very basic 3D models of something that you're trying to teach somebody work. And they work very effectively, despite the fact that technically everyone wants it to be as close as possible to physical reality, which I think is one of the hangups. And I think it's one of the things, Mark and I were having a conversation earlier, and we're going to rehash some of it a little bit later in front of the audience here, about the fact that the adoption rate of this technology go very slowly. Now, there is tons and tons and tons of use cases across the automotive industry that are currently using AR and VR, as Mark said. They're using it in the design of the cars all the way up to the sales of the cars, and they're using it for configuration. They're using it for training drivers, training engineers, training the people who are doing the manufacturing. But there are a lot of use cases that we've seen where you'll see them do an experiment. Very generally ends up being a very successful implementation of trying something. Toyota did some manufacturing work with the HoloLens. This is one of the ones in particular that I can think of. And they did a very successful experiment in teaching manufacturing workers how to perform certain tasks using HoloLenses and heads-up displays with augmented reality. Then it just sort of went away. It disappeared. And it was, Mark put it, the greatest word I can hear, was just shelved. It was shelved. And it may come back, but it hasn't recently. And it's one of those things where, from my perspective, from the perspective of a technologist, very weird to see a company do an experiment, put a lot of money into developing an experiment, find that it can, in fact, improve performance, improve production rates, and then it just gets shelved. One of those things where, Mark provided some context, and I'm going to ask him up in a minute to provide the context again. But the fact that it's like, as a technologist, it makes no sense to see that happen at an enterprise or a functioning, manufacturing scale. But Sergey just brought up that other point. That's a great point. Again, something that we in the technology space have learned because we've seen clients. they've, applied augmented reality technology or virtual reality technology to a training scenario, realize, what, you really don't need perfect fidelity to train somebody on how to do something. You train them on the task itself. You have enough fidelity to get the information across. The other one that I bring up quite often in almost every meeting that I have with customers, and in some cases with investors, the fact that, when you're dealing with augmented reality in particular, everybody assumes 3D. Like the important piece of this, I myself, when I came into this industry, when I started this industry, was very, very focused on 3D has to be perfect, 3D has to be high performance, everything has to be optimized around displaying things in 3D. And then when you actually start getting use cases in front of customers, you realize 3D is maybe 10% of the content that goes into an augmented reality experience. It's usually the anchor. There is almost always something 3D in an experience, but then it is surrounded by all sorts of other data, whether that data is text, images, videos, audio, a lot of other things that are not necessarily 3D or animation. So it's one of those things that you just sort of learn. And at that point, I'm just going to kind of stop talking at this, ask both of you to kind of come back up here and join me. And the stage here, I'm going to get off of the slides on our picture-in-picture on Facebook live stream. So Mark and Sergey, you guys want to join me? We're going to start taking questions. Facebook Live. So those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, feel free to just type your comments into the chat. And anyone in the room, if you would like, actually, let's this is one of those things that I always do this at the beginning of the event, and I forgot to do it this time, so I'm going to do it right now, which is anybody who's never been to a VR Chicago event before, at the bottom center of your screen in Verbella, there's a raise hand button. Can you raise your hand if you've never been to one of these before? Got nobody who's brand new? Okay, we'll reverse it then. Can you raise your hand if you have been to one of these events before? And again, you raise your hand by pressing the button at the bottom center of your screen. Okay. Hands down. That's how we're going to get into the Q&A. So how we're going to operate the Q&A, again, for those of you watching on Facebook Live, all you have to do is type your question into the chat. And for those of you in the room, all you have to do is raise your hand. I will say, please, if you are going to ask a question, raise your hand and keep it raised until I call on you. When I do call on you, down, and you can press the mute button on your microphone, which will open your mic, and you can ask your question. And then please remute yourself. But the one thing I will say is, if you have a question, raise your hand and keep it raised, because the list does sort on my screen based on the order in which people. I'm curious to see if who's in the room is going to ask the first question, and John. So congratulations, John. You want to put your hand down and unmute yourself? Hand is down. Microphone button on the bottom left of your screen. Or you can also just press the one button on your computer. Or you can try typing your question in the chat if you're having trouble talking. All right, well, while we are waiting for, there we go, John is typing. While he is reading, while he's typing the question, Mark, if you wanted to actually just rehash just what you and I were talking about before the event started, about just the fact that, the cycle, what it takes for car companies to actually adopt the new technology.
Yeah, I think that it's important for people to understand that car companies are ginormous. I mean, they're massive, slow-moving entities that are very compartmentalized. So Toyota North America may be doing things in North America that Toyota Asia or Toyota Europe has no interest in or believes that they have a better solution. So it's very, very rare that things go up in a car company. Generally, they come down. So it will be Toyota Japan headquarters will say, this is how we're going to our new architecture for our vehicle for the next decade. So Toyota has a new platform called TGMA. And they've basically said every vehicle that we build will be built off this platform with the exception of oddities like the Toyota Tundra, which is unique to North America. So architecture is set in stone long before a vehicle hits the streets. And by the time that vehicle hits the street, it's already obsolete. Not even, I mean, if you think about the rollout of Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, how long it took manufacturers to begin to roll that out into vehicles, the architectures of the vehicles couldn't support that technology until just recently, even though the technology is fairly rudimentary and basic. So you have to think of an automaker, I think, top down if you want a technology to progress, a new technology to progress rather than bottom up. So you may be able to go in and do a small group focus with a manufacturing plant, for example, Toyota's plant in Georgia, and you may be able to use AR and VR to streamline their production process and make it so much better, so much safer for employees, so much better health situation. Because in plant, you get a lot of repetitive movement injuries and disabilities. And so automakers are constantly trying to find ways to make plants safer and healthier for their employees. And you may go in and do a study there and figure out a great way to install dashboards, but that rarely moves up the food chain. It basically stays siloed in that plant. So it's a little bit difficult for car companies to be nimble, like maybe a small software company or a development team that's a part of Apple, for example, that is responsible for, let's say, the iPhone. That's completely different than rolling out technologies.
John, do you have your question? And I saw you typing. I'm going to keep talking until I see a response. So feel free to get your question in the chat. I see him typing. Here we go. First time VRAR attendee, also first time Verbal user. That's fine. No worries at all. Did you have a question? So again, John chatted here that, sorry folks, first time VRAR attendee and first time Verbal user. So he might have just been raising his hand to let us know that he was a first time attendee a little bit late. So no, he has no question. Okay, that's great. Actually, you know what? This is one of the things that I do. We have a smaller audience here, so we can definitely have question. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you are more from the automotive industry, opposed to like the VR technology? So I would say Mark is obviously definitely automotive transportation industry. The audience is primarily automotive or transportation industry. You are primarily technology industry, or AR. Nobody's raising hands. This is fun. Got to have a little interactivity. We're gonna make. Oh wait, that's sometimes going up. Ben, Katya. Hands raised, guys. Raise those hands. If you're VR AR technology industry, please raise your hand. Yep. Okay, we got a question from Facebook. Let me read it real quick. So this is a question from Francis. I'm going to read it exactly, and then I'll try and make sure I'm same principle of Mark of the next generation scheme of the car, how do we see the next generation scheme for automotive and transportation sectors at a higher and transportation sectors technology not exists yet? Any thought on that? So I guess trying to understand your question here, Francis. As you had mentioned, Mark, the kind of just the fact that it takes 10 years for a technology potentially to get into a car because they're deciding on a platform now, and any changes to it is going to take a long time to get in. Taking that back out to our other question about like commercial technology, I guess, or commercial transportation, even potentially expanding it beyond, cars to other industries in the transportation space. So, as you had mentioned, that like the truck drivers who are the truck drivers who are in, I guess I couldn't call them truck drivers, the truck engineers who are in the automotive trucks or the automated trucks. See that same kind of technology? Do you see that getting beyond automotive into things like trains, boats, planes, other transportation technologies?
Yeah, I think it's there in some cases. I mean, we're seeing planes, that can fly on autopilot, land themselves, stuff like that. But I think there's an emerging technology that we is behind the scenes that we don't see quite yet. And that's going to change transportation, personal transportation. And that's the whole idea around ownership. So right now, if you want to get around, you got to either buy a car, you got to rent a car, or you got to use rideshare services, right? And rideshare services have shown to not be economical if you get around a lot. They can be very economical if you only need a car once a week to go to and from the store. What's going to change over the next decade is how cars are owned. I think that you're going to see rental car companies begin to offer kind of just-in-time delivery vehicles. So, for example, you need to go to work every day and you need to get from your house to the train. Instead of having your wife drop you off or your husband drop you off, you will actually have a car show up at your house. You get in, it will take you to the train, and then you'll take the train into work. And people won't own cars. People that own 3 cars right now, let's say me and my wife, we have a car each, and then we have one for our kids. Maybe now we go down to 1 car only, and then we begin to share cars through services. There's going to need to be technology behind that in a massive way. Car makers have shown they're very, very bad at subscription services. So from a car rental standpoint, they've tried it. Volvo's tried it. Porsche's tried it. Mercedes has tried it. Cadillac's tried it. They've all shut their systems down because they're not good at it. They're good at making and selling cars, not necessarily subscribing people up to drive their cars. So I think that's the next thing that's bubbling behind the scenes, and there's going to have to be technology to drive that. I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know necessarily that that's VR or AR, but that's where I see it, at least.
Oh, it's still emerging technology, and it's a big one. Guys, Sergey.
Yeah, yes. Excuse me. I will add a few lines to that. So basically, this change of the ownership model is what which is what all our automotive customers expect for the last, let's say, 5 years. And what you, Mark, said is, I totally agree with that. Like, statistics says that typical family car or typical personal car is in use for less than 1 hour per day. The other 23 hours, it is just parked somewhere, taken in and takes the parking lot and nothing else. But the problem with this just-in-time delivery and this shared ownership and so on and so forth is exactly that you mentioned in your presentation, is the absence of fully functional autopilot. Because without it, you cannot deliver the car to your door. Right, and that's exactly what was behind the idea of Uber. Uber has, at least they had negative current profitability, and their plan, as far as I understand, was remove the driver at some point and replace driver with autopilot. So they will save on drivers. But autopilot is not there, and it will not be there like a fully functional one, 100% reliable in the foreseeable future. So it's interesting how the industry will progress. So people will still keep buying cars, and these shared services, well, they get some traction, but very much less than we could expect.
I would totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, Uber becomes profitable when they eliminate their drivers, right? And until that point, and they'll get less and less profitable because the drivers will demand more and more, for providing that service.
Well, and I'm gonna take a step back, Sergey, because one of the things that you actually, I want to ask you a direct question. One of the things that you didn't cover in your presentation was your background, your personal background at all. Mark went into his 30 years of playing cars and stuff, 30 years of history in the industry, and then also playing, tinkering with cars. How did you get into this? What's your start? How did you get into this space?
Well, I was playing computer games when I was a kid. So then I just hooked up on all this computer stuff. I got my first job actually was very much related to internet when it was just beginning to appear in my country. Then I was fortunate to get an entry-level position at Intel, the guys who make microprocessors, and I worked there for 3 years, picking up the culture from the company. That ended in the year of 2000, at the same year when I finished my university. And after that, I was just, hanging around this internet stuff, doing web hosting first, then doing websites and running a web design studio for a few years. Then it somehow grew to custom software development, and then we started. Then as usual, we contacted a few bigger customers. One of them was BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. They taught me how to properly run software projects, and that was a kickstart for the company and for how we see things. And then it somehow played and brought me some fun and money and growth to the group. That's it. And my personal background is actually international economics. It's not engineering, and it's not software.
Oh, I guess what you study doesn't necessarily matter. Technically, I came in from a psychology degree. No, but I mean, you get to the point, and I guess, Mark, we've talked a lot about automated, autopilot and auto driving, and I guess probably the biggest statement that I've heard over and over from the companies that actually do AI-based driving and auto driving, and I've definitely heard the thing that you had mentioned earlier, the concept you mentioned earlier about the fact that the cars are going to get to the point where they need to talk to each other for this to be. But the concept of the fact is, automated driving is more dangerous because the automated drivers will always react the same way predictably after a while. But having a mix of automated drivers along with human drivers is where it gets dangerous, because the human drivers are essentially unpredictable. Is that something you've heard also, or no?
Yeah, I have a great story with that. I was driving a Mercedes that was fitted with a version that they don't sell here. It's an autopilot version that is pretty kind of like a level 3 autonomous. And people quickly figured out that this vehicle wouldn't go over the speed limit and wouldn't change lanes unless there was ample clearance. And they literally, it was like I was the kid getting picked on in high school. I mean, I'd get on an on-ramp and it was in LA and they wouldn't let me in. And it was hilarious. And I mean, they probably had no clue. They just thought I was a bad driver, but that's how they treated. They basically treated this car like a bad driver. And the car wasn't a bad driver. It was just obeying the law. So I think that's funny that you bring that up. Yeah, that transition window is going to be awful. And think about, I mean, we're selling 15 million cars a year in the United States. Okay, that's just new cars. So right now there's almost 300 million registered vehicles in the United States. So even if every car today were built autonomous, 100% perfect, it'd be 30 years before we got rid of all the other cars. So that transition time is either going to have to be legislated, or it's going to have to be just kind of like an open window where who knows what's going to happen on the road. But it's probably going to more likely be legislated if you see what they did with cash for clunkers a few years ago, where the government said, we want to get all these dirty cars off the road. If you have a car that's more than 10 years old, basically we're going to give you a lot of money for it. And that did move the needle very quickly to get a bunch of cars off the road. But it costs a lot of money to do that. That was a very expensive program for the government to run. And I don't know that that's a supportable option in this case.
Yeah, Mark, actually, just on the spot, just as you were saying that, there may be a different solution to that, something that Airbus has already implemented in their airplanes. Actually, as you mentioned, airplanes can fly themselves, but pilots are still monitoring them. So what Airbus does is preventing actively preventing pilots from doing stupid things. So it's a problem for them to actually crash a plane, but they are still in control. So maybe something like that will be happening with the autonomous cars on the roads. Like you as a driver will still be in control to cope with unpredicted behavior of another drivers. But everything else, including your own safety, your own behavior in the lines and something like that, will be controlled by the car. So I'm not sure how exactly that might work, but maybe this is some way of a solution without, or in combination with expensive governmental programs.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And in fact, Volvo, they had me up in Sweden one time, and they have this famous moose test where they try to get their vehicles to avoid a moose with autonomous driving. And they said the biggest question in autonomous is the life or death decision. So, for example, a woman is crossing the street with a baby stroller, and the only option for the autonomous system is to veer into a semi-truck or hit the woman. Who makes that choice? That's something that we're going to have to figure out. It's something that's going to happen. Yeah.
So that's actually a very famous. This is a philosophy ethics question that comes up quite often. I've heard it referred to with autonomous driving a lot of times lately, which is exactly as you phrased it. Of if I have to prioritize the passenger in the car versus the person in the street, which one do I prioritize, essentially? And obviously, every driver pretty much going to say, if you're not prioritizing the person in the car, I'm not buying the car. Which makes sense, because ultimately there shouldn't be a person. In theory, if cars are going to follow the logic, then they do have to a certain degree, deal with the fact that, someone jumping in front of a car, wrong sense, shouldn't be prioritized over the people who are in the car.
But basically, if you are in the driver's seat, you will not necessarily take the same decision.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
You might just out of sheer reaction steer away from that and to your death. You don't even realize it, but that's your instinct. It's kind of interesting.
I love how whenever we talk about autonomous driving, that ethics question comes up.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk has often said that the problem with autonomous driving isn't autonomous driving; it's the people behind the wheel that aren't autonomous driving.
Well, and I mean, the other thing you brought up was the concept of not having, not being an owner, and I know this is one of those things that comes up from a generation to generation argument perspective of everyone saying, millennials and below don't want to own things. They want, they don't want to have to, whether it's Generation X and baby boomers, like we were all, it's our house, it's our car. but people make the argument. Again, this is obviously a generalization, so I'm not making the argument that this is true, but there is the generalization that says that people who are in younger generations, they don't want to own, they want to be able to use things, otherwise more conscious of kind of a sharing economy. But when that comes down to it, the other, aside from the simple issue of getting the car to the person, there's also the utility of it. And yeah, Tom, great comment there. There's what you want and there's what you can do. I for one, I'm Gen X. I'm firmly Gen X, and I would love to never have to own another car as long as I knew that I could always reliably get from point A to point B. And as you brought up, there's 15 million cars that are sold every year. How are the car dealers going to? How are the manufacturers going to appreciate or enjoy the fact that, hey, well, if people are more efficiently using cars, they're not going to sell as many cars. That come into the equation.
So that's a really interesting thing. And I think that the car makers have learned a lesson with the supply chain nightmare that's going on right now. Other than this quarter where Ford had not record losses, but big losses because of their Rivian stock debacle. But car makers are making more money than ever selling less and less cars. But what they are doing is they're manufacturing cars that are the highest profit per unit and selling those cars without having to put massive incentives on them and massive marketing spends. Yes, you still see some car commercials, but gone are the $3,000 cash back from the dealer. All that stuff's gone. And so car makers have learned a little bit lesson. Whether or not they can adhere to that is something else. But I think that they're realizing right now that they can make money selling less. Like you talked about, Matthew, they can do that. Whether or not they will is a different story. I don't know. I guess I can't answer that question, but for General Motors, for example, they got into Maven a couple years ago. It was a company that was basically a rideshare company. They started it up and they ran it and they owned it, and they figured out that it wasn't profitable for them. They couldn't make it work. Probably because there was a lot of technologies in the way. So I don't know. I guess the answer is to that. The automakers haven't figured it out yet. And so if they haven't figured it out, I don't know that there's an answer out there, because usually they have the best and the brightest.
Well, and Maven was kind of like Turo, isn't it? It was more of a rent your own car kind of thing.
Yeah, it was that, but it was also dealers could do Maven as well. So a dealer could put 50 vehicles into the Maven's pipe and basically make them available for people to drive. So it was utilizing. There was a ton of excess inventory at the time on dealer lots, so it was utilizing that inventory and trying to maybe maximize some revenue from that.
Yeah, I mean that's it gets back to the question that you kind of brought this up too, about the concept between Uber being profitable versus the drivers always fighting for more. Maven strikes me as, okay, it's car dealers trying to find a way to effectively take a bad situation and make it better. Let's utilize inventory that hasn't been purchased. Whereas Turo kind of strikes me as the old model of people who would buy a sailboat and actually, it's the same concept basically. Okay, I own a sailboat, but I'm only going to be on it once a week. There's 6 days a week that I could let other people sail it. That's shared ownership. There's entire international companies around shared ownership of sailboats for that purpose, but it really doesn't benefit the manufacturer of the boat as much as it kind of benefits one person who says, okay, I'm going to buy the boat. They're not profiting off it, but they're definitely offsetting a significant portion of their costs. And I'm kind of wondering, because Turo seems to be like that concept with the car of, I don't think the drivers are, people aren't buying cars to share them and make a profit off it. It's not like an Airbnb model. It's more they're offsetting their own ownership costs.
Yeah, and that might be the magic sauce, because if you think about it, think about people that have like summer homes in Florida or winter homes or whatever you call them. They rent that out 3/4 of the year. They live down there for a few months and then come back to Chicago. And if they couldn't do that, they probably wouldn't have gotten that second home altogether. So maybe it's a situation where people kind of buy as many cars because they almost can make money on them. But at some point, you have too many cars out there. So I don't know that the math works on that, but that is an interesting perspective.
Well, let's look at the car from a probably a little bit different perspective. Maybe 2 years before COVID, we had a discussion with guys from Audi, Audi new technology. I don't remember the exact name of this subsidiary. It was quite a few years ago, as I said, 2 years before the COVID. They already noticed this trend that people buy less cars. It wasn't new. So their new source of revenue was collecting data from the cars. Like we all speak about shared ownership model, but I think that we miss one big thing, that is that the world is driven by data flows, and the car is a rolling probe. It can collect variety of parameters from the outside, from the quality of air, from the traffic density, which is actually collected by Google, for example, to the quality of air, or to physical conditions of people who drive it. And so we can run data collection campaigns, for example, and sell this data to whoever. So from the point of view of these guys, this was an opportunity for rising their profits as well, without selling more cars, but by using the data that actually comes from the car.
Sergey, that's an awesome point. I mean, that's where automakers are switching to this subscription model now, where they're going to try and figure out ways to not only sell a car to you, but also upsell you along the way on a whole bunch of other things. And, people are very worried that it's almost like where, you sell, what is that product, the laser printer or the inkjet printer, where you sell them the printer, but really you're making money on the ink and not on the printer. I think you're totally right with that, Sergey.
Mark, it's not about upselling to you. It's not about upselling to you. It's about actually buying or taking from you. Like, the car moves around the town. It's got LiDARs, it's got air quality sensors, it's got whatever. It can actually measure your pulse and your and how you breathe. And this data can be collected and uploaded to the cloud of the car maker. And then car maker can sell this data elsewhere. So it's not about upselling, like Jaguar tries selling new maps on me while I already have Google Maps, so I don't need it. It's about collecting. It's about data collection and data processing. So maybe at some point they will offer you discounts for the right to use your data.
It strikes me that what you're talking about, Sergey, is you're talking about the kind of the business model behind Waze, which I don't know how many people use the Waze navigation system, but it's Waze is it's 100% free to use it, and yeah, they run some ads, but from what I've been again, I could be completely wrong on this, but from what I've been told, they don't really make much money on their ads. What they're making the money on is the fact that the people who are using Waze for navigation, they're collecting the data. They're collecting essentially the route data and the traffic data and how, I run Waze in Chicago just because I can get a prediction on, hey, there's an accident up ahead, take a better route before I hear it on the radio. And so even though I know the path that I'm going, I don't need the navigation. I'm still running that system. And from what I've understood, Waze, like the fact that they're offering GPS to drivers, their product is the data that they're then selling to locations and the billboard sign companies and the large about like, hey, this is a good location because it's very, very high traffic. You get this many cars going by it every day based on all this data that we have. Because yeah, like to Sergey's point, they're not trying. Waze is never really. Yeah, they run some ads that say, hey, you can go pop over at Burger King or whatever. I never pay attention to those ads, but Waze is selling that data to Burger King, saying, hey, this is a very, very high traffic area. You want to put a store here.
Yeah, absolutely. But Waze runs on a mobile phone. A mobile phone is a small device that is quite limited in its sensing capabilities. And the car is a big four-wheel platform, so you can load it up with a lot of sensors from dust in the air up to whatever, up to detection of chemical substances in dangerous chemicals in the air or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot more you can do with a car. I mean, I kind of liken it to one of the models we used when I was building the car shopping website back with my previous company. One of the models that we had for revenue that is still in use today is selling that data back to the manufacturer. So on an anonymous level, and Matt, if you go, let's say on cars.com or Auto Trader, they're tracking what you do, what cars you're looking at, what cars you're cross-shopping, what prices you're looking at, and they're selling that to the highest bidder. And that Ford uses that information against you to get you to buy their products. They use it in a very aggressive way to get you. They follow you around, and it's. I mean, I know, Serge, it's a little off the topic, but you're right. It's a data collection stream that is being utilized as a revenue stream by a company, Waze or Audi or whoever it is. I think that's definitely in the future of vehicles, but I think steering back toward AR and VR. I think that the automakers are very advanced in utilizing that in the design and manufacturing processes. But one of the things that we talked about earlier about before offline was suppliers are building cars today, not manufacturers. So the new Ford Maverick that comes out, Ford designs that vehicle and then they job it out to suppliers to build the dashboard, to build the bed, to build the suspension systems, to build the drivetrain components. And those suppliers are the ones that are more nimble and are able to make better use of these technologies to enhance and to streamline their not only design, but their production processes. And I think that that's a huge market that can be tackled with this because a lot of those suppliers are still pretty small companies that may not have the resources to be developing these platforms on their own.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, augmented reality, virtual reality is not, we lump them together, but they're very separate. But they are communication technologies, which means they can be used throughout the entire life cycle of manufacturing to, everything from the executives about the different product offerings, teaching the salespeople about the different configurations, teaching the consumer about what their options are, or any sort of procedural of, hey, here's how you task, here's how you use this, for manufacturing it, the procedure for manufacturing it, troubleshooting it, and make maintenance. All of those types of things can be communicated using the technology, which is great. And it's we all know that that's where the communication is going. It's going to take some time to get there. But I do think that's an important point about realizing that in some of these cases, it's not necessarily Ford and GM that are target of, so for the AR VR companies, it's not necessarily Ford and GM. It's going to be nice to have Ford and GM on your website, that's your company that you're working with. Realistically, you might want to be going more directly with the suppliers, parts, and the people who are going to be defining. They'll be, kind of, it reminds me of the work that we do at Bundle AR. We're working, we work with the military. And while we're working directly with the military, there's also a whole lot of opportunity for us to be working with the contractors that are making the equipment that the military, opposed to just directly working with the military, because creating support for, a oil on a Humvee. Well, it's probably GM who's produced the actual manual for that. It's not necessarily the military. So yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. The one thing I did want to touch on really quickly, just about the data that you were talking about, though, is Tesla. Because I run an augmented reality company. We collect data. We're not collecting the data. Our application, when you use reality, it by definition, it does track everything that you're doing, and we're doing it mostly so that you can optimize how you're going to use the augmented reality. So, for example, as you kind of put it, these cars are gigantic rolling ways of collecting data. Tesla, probably the most effective use of all the sensors on a Tesla, providing the information back to Tesla so that they can better train their own AI for autonomous driving in the future. So again, it's just a different way to look at the things that are being collected. It's not necessarily, obviously there are companies that are looking for better ways to sell you stuff, but they're also looking to just improve products. So as I say, we're getting close to the end of time here. I was going to ask Sergey, do you have any other final thoughts? Anything you just want to add? Mark, and then we can get to open networking.
Well, I don't think so.
Okay, you're good to go. All right.
Yeah, I would just want to, we didn't even talk about Auto Show, which is something that I do, but one of the things that we've done AI, augmented reality at the Auto Show. We've done some virtual reality. One of the problems that we have in doing that is funding it. So there are cool things that you can do with at the Auto Show. There's so much going on and so many cool things that you can do with an app on your phone. And the dollar signs that come along with doing it just make it prohibitively expensive for a show that's only 10 days out of every year. But on the flip side, I would say that there may be potential in the event space for that if you can find events that are nationwide. And I want to roll something out real quick. Is Volkswagen did a tour last year of their ID4, which is their new electric vehicle. And they stopped in about 60 cities across the country, and they had a little bit of virtual reality going on there where you could kind of like model your own car and you could add features and stuff like that. You put on these goggles, kind of cool. And it made sense to do it because they were doing it in so many places. And it allowed them, they only had 4 vehicles for people to drive. So while people were waiting to get in their cars, they could play this little game. And it got them into a familiarization with the vehicle before they even got in it. So there wasn't that barrier, because even though it's a pretty basic electric vehicle, it operates in the same way that we would operate a regular car, there are a few quirks. And if someone got into that vehicle cold, they'd probably be put off by those quirks. But if they're prepped on it by the virtual reality, they're going to be more accepting of that technology change. And so I think there's an opportunity there in the event space or in the activation space, maybe.
The one thing I will say to that is, I didn't talk too much. I know a lot of people here know my background. You don't. I come from the events world. That's actually a lot of how I got into AR and VR technology, or more to the point, any sort of emerging technology, was because developing technology specifically for things like trade shows. Trade show booths is where you see some of the most advanced. Frankly, it's a lot of one-off at those points, and it becomes very difficult to deliver some of the things that you could do one-off in a trade show booth to actually do that at scale. But yeah, that's event technology and trade show technology. That's a good point. Yeah, it's expense. It is prohibitive to think about the fact that if you're developing something for a trade show that's only taking place 10 days a year, that is a big expense for a very kind of big capability. But about the fact that Ford or GM or any of these car manufacturers, they can develop something for a trade show booth, and then they'll use that. They'll use it for 10 days at the Chicago Auto Show, but they'll also go use it at the Detroit Auto Show and the LA Auto Show, and 20 other different types of shows. that they're going to do throughout the year, it does actually end up making sense a lot of the time to develop that type of tech. All right, with that, I'm going to thank my two presenters for joining me today. I do actually want to follow up with both of you because there's things that have been said tonight that have piqued my, kind of brought up some other conversations that I want to have with you. Very specific to my company, and I frankly don't want to talk business out in the open on public like this. Would pretty much bore everybody. So, but I do want to have some follow-up conversations with you. So I want to thank both of you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sergey. Again, DriveChicago.com and HQ Software. Please stick around because what we're going to do now, which is what we do every single time, is essentially the formal presentation of the event is going to end, and I'm going to make everybody's seats go away in about 2 seconds, like this. The next thing I want to do is I do want to, kind of a little bit of housekeeping that we always do. Next month, we will be talking, the topic is going to be entertainment industry. I believe we're actually going to be sports is what we're hoping to do because we've previously done things like concerts and, video games and movies. But we're going to try and focus the entertainment topic on sports this time around. But we'll see, how the speaker list shakes out over the next month. Beyond that, we will be once again approaching law as a topic, and then we will be getting back to games in August. So we do this event every month. Again, we're targeting at this point, and I'm gonna say it publicly. I can't make any 100% promises, but we are expecting and hoping at this point that in July we will get back to in-person/hybrid. Again, for those of you in the audience, please, if you have any questions that you didn't want to ask live here, feel free to connect with our presenters. Feel free to connect with me or Tom or anyone else on the BRAR Chicago team. For those of you who are going to watch this after the fact, because the video lives on Facebook forever, and it's going to, we do get a significant number of views after the event. Feel free to reach out to us. You can always find our information on Chicago.com. But what we are going to do now for everyone in the audience is, in a few moments, I'm going to press a button here called Private Volumes. And the way that that's going to work is if you look on the floor in front of you, you will see on the floor there will be blue circles that appear. It allows us to all sort of be in the same room and talk, but not for each other. So if you're in one of those blue circles, you will only be able to hear and speak to the side of blue circles. You'll be able to talk to anybody who is outside of all of the blue circles. But that's how the private volumes work. That allows us to get back to doing some more informal networking. Again, a lot of people don't like to ask their questions in front of an entire group, and that's understandable. The coolest thing that this technology enables is to let people be a little bit more comfortable behind an avatar. But with that, I will turn private volumes on. I will end the webcast. Again, those of you in Facebook Live world, specifically Francis, who has been commenting all night, joining, and we look forward to seeing you on next month. With that, I'm going to turn on the private volumes right. So we can show people that you can actually, I should turn the private volumes off and let people know that you can do clapping things just by clicking on your name. But there we go. Thank you once again, guys. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Sergey. Sergey, I know it's very, very late for you, so no one will hold you to sticking around if you don't want to talk. But I'm gonna once again thanks everybody on the Facebook live stream. I'm gonna turn off the Facebook live stream right now. About 10 seconds for that to transition. Mark, now I got to ask the question. What was your website before?
I'm sorry, my mic was off. Consumer Guide Automotive, so cgauto.com. At one point, it was the most popular automotive shopping website. It's not anymore. I'm not there anymore.
I think you and I have crossed paths before.
Yeah, I think so too.
Mentioned that you had the most popular auto site like that. I'm like, cross paths with somebody because I talked to someone about that. I can't judge time. It's got to be close to 20, if not more.
Yeah,
that have been. Yeah, unfortunately, I cannot judge time.
So what are we doing here? Do I walk down over there or something or what?
Yeah, so you can walk in any of the circles and just talk to people individually. That's generally the way it goes. I'm kind of wondering if the guy, I don't see his name on the list anymore. The guy from PwC doesn't appear to be here anymore, but Jay, Anya, John, hopefully John's figure out how to get his microphone working. I'm going to walk in with Anya and Jay.